time. Who were some other notable descendants of Caleb, the son of Hezron? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Chronicles on walking through the Bible.
Is worth the glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verses 42 to 55. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 42. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, 1 Chronicles chapter 2, beginning at verse 42. The descendants of Caleb, the brother of Jerahmeel, were Mesha, his firstborn, who was the father of Ziph, and the sons of Marishah, the father of Hebron. The sons of Hebron were Korah, Tepuah, Rechem, and Shema. Shema begot Raham, the father of Jorcham, and Rechem begot Shammai. The son of Shammai was Maon, and Maon was the father of Bethzur. Ephah, Caleb's concubine, bore Haran, Moza, and Gazez, and Haran begat Gazez. And the sons of Jadai were Regem, Jotham, Geshan, Pelet, Ephah, and Sheaph. Maacah, Caleb's concubine, bore Sheber and Tirana. She bore Shaphat, the father of Madmenah, Shiva, the father of Machbenah, and the father of Gibeah. And the daughter of Caleb was Achsah. These were the descendants of Caleb. The sons of Hur, the firstborn, Ephrathah, who were Shobal, the father of Kirjath-jearim, Salma, the father of Bethlehem, and Hareph, the father of Beth-gader. And Shobal, the father of Kirjath-jearim, had descendants, Haroiah, and the half-families of Manuhoth. The families of Kirjath-jearim were the Ithrites, the Puthites, the Shumathites, and the Mishraites. From these came the Zorathites and the Eshteolites. The sons of Salma were Bethlehem, the Netophalites, Atroth, Beth Joab, half the Manathathites, and the Zorites. And the families of the scribes who dwelt at Jabez were Tirathites, and the Shimeathites, and the Sukathites. These were the Kenites who came from Hamath, the father of the house of Rechab. In this chapter, we have been looking at the lineage of Judah. To many, this has probably been a recitation of names, but to the Jews returning from exile, it was an important list of names that concerned inheritance, duty within the nation, and the ability to look forward to the Messiah. Chapter 2 specifically has looked at the house of Judah. Judah had 5 sons, but only 3 bore him descendants. The most important among these was Perez, whose descendants fill most of this chapter. Perez had 2 sons, Hezron and Hamul. Of these 2 sons, Hezron is the most important because from him the lineage of King David and the Messiah spring. It would be through Hezron's second son, Ram, that David would come. The descendants of Hezron's oldest son, Jerahmeel, is given, but apart from a passing reference to them in 1 Samuel, not much else besides their names are known to us. That doesn't mean they weren't important to Judah, for remember, inheritance was dependent on family, but for us, there's not much more we can say. We also learned that Hezron married one of the daughters of Machir, of the tribe of Manasseh, and it was through this marriage that Jair was born, with Jair being a mighty warrior who received cities in the region of Gilead. Jair seemingly was adopted into the tribe of Manasseh, perhaps following the death of Hezron, hence why he received an inheritance there instead of within the territory of Judah. Verse 22 through the end of the chapter gives us the descendants of the youngest son of Hezron, Caleb. In our last lesson, we saw some of the descendants of Caleb already mentioned, Jesher, Shobab, Ardon, and Hur. And so what we get here is the chronicler returning to Caleb after taking a short detour to tell us further of the descendants of Hezron and the descendants of Jerahmeel. Now, at first, it might be confusing when we read about Mesha being the firstborn of Caleb, because we already had someone introduced to us as being the firstborn, and that was Jesher. What we need to remember about Caleb, though, is that he had multiple wives, including concubines. And so what we have here in verse 42 is the firstborn of Caleb with this wife, that, of course, being Mesha. Mesha was the father of Ziph, meaning he was the lord or prince of Ziph, with many of the residents of that place coming from Mesha. We then have Marishah, who was the father of Hebron. Now, from Scripture, we know that Mareshah and Hebron, along with Tappuah and Shema, were all cities in Judah. However, Korah and Rechem are not. The question then is, are these names referencing people, or are these names referencing descendants who settled as leaders of these places, like is done with Tekoa and Ziph in this chapter and other places later on down in the chapter? And the answer has to do with the usage of the word begot. With Tekoa and Ziph, although these could be people's names, since we don't read of them begetting anybody, we can safely assume that they reference the place bearing that name and not a person. However, Hebron had sons, as did Shema and Rechem, and so these must be referencing people who also happen to share names of places in Judah, with those places maybe being named after them. This happens in modern times too, as cities are often named after people, and sometimes people are named after places. And so that it happened here shouldn't concern us. Nor does it really matter one way or another, because what we're dealing with are the descendants of Caleb. Israel knew what these lists meant and could use them for their purpose. For us, we can note the names, use them for our purposes of tying them to biblical accounts found elsewhere, and to the Messiah. But beyond that, if we don't understand all the names and their relationships, it's not a big deal for us and will not be an issue that keeps us out of heaven. We can be confident, though, that these records were recorded accurately in the original manuscripts as inspired by God, were understood by the original audience, and were extremely useful for their purpose. And in that, we can place our faith. Of note before closing, we find from the house of Caleb are his descendants that would inhabit and become princes in Kirjath-jearim and Bethlehem, two notable cities within the boundaries of Judah. In all then, chapter 2 paints us a more detailed picture of the house of Judah than we had in the past. We know where some of the people we have talked about before came from, as well as the origins of some of the places in Judah. Hopefully, this will help us gain a deeper understanding of Scripture moving forward. The Lord willing, in the next lesson, the chronicler will focus in on the house of David. So we hope you'll be back for that discussion. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Chronicles chapter 3, verses 1 to 9, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.